Hello, I'm Ed Raby, otherwise known as the Rabid Atheist, a former pastor turned atheist, now a compassionate anti-theist. Welcome to my channel. Feel free to like or dislike the video as you see fit, so feel free to hit those buttons. Feel free to comment below, and I would appreciate it if you would subscribe to the channel and hit your notification bell for more content as it is released. You're also free to share my videos as much as you like. The purpose of this channel is educational in regards to atheist and deconversion issues and other issues related to those issues, such as politics, philosophy, Bible, theology, etc. I want to give a shout out to the Rabid Nation. Welcome to all of you. Still a small fledgling country, but still growing very much. And for all of you that also want and have a wannabe desire to be a part of the Rabid Nation as well. Today I'm going to address a video that many other atheist YouTubers and other freethinker YouTubers have addressed, which is called 11 Questions to Atheists. I want to start off by saying that usually when apologists talk this way and they give you questions that, that atheists can't answer, so to speak, which is the title of this video, 11 Questions that Atheists Can't Answer, I always get, amused because I used to see these things before I became an atheist. And I would immediately go, you do realize that about 12 atheists have already answered your stupid questions. Now, I'm not casting dispersion on these stupid questions. I'm just saying that they were asked in that way is a very stupid way to ask them, that somehow they can't answer them. Atheists can answer many questions, and most of the time, the questions we're asked to answer have nothing to do with atheism. Just as a quick recap, atheism doesn't make a claim. Atheism simply looks at the God claim and says, I'm sorry, I find your evidence unconvincing that God exists. It is up to the theist to continue to make their case of why I should believe God exists. And if you don't provide sufficient evidence for that, I can simply say, sorry, I still don't believe your claim, and dismiss your claim. Until such time as you provide convincing evidence of that, that's what needs to be done. So whenever I see these questions, I automatically know a couple of things. One, a good preponderance of these questions are not going to be about atheism whatsoever. In fact, I find that apologists tend to lump things like humanism, cosmology, evolution, all kinds of things, and just shove it into this banner topic of atheism. But as I said, atheism only says one thing. And it's not even a claim. It simply says, I find the evidence for your claim unconvincing that there is a God. That's all atheists say. And so anything else is actually targeted at more than just atheists. If you attack evolution, for instance, you do realize there are theistic evolutionists. There are people that believe in all kinds of different religions and faiths and have all kinds of spiritual beliefs that also believe in evolution, that cosmology and many other things. So I just want to get that out right away before I start addressing these questions, and I'm going to have them answer those questions in their own video and then respond as if I'm having a conversation.
Hello, you've reached ChristianApologist.com, and I'm S.J. Thomason, and today I'm going to present to you 11 questions that atheists cannot answer. The first question, how do you explain why the early Christian martyrs preached for decades saying they saw the risen Christ?
How do I explain the early Christian martyrs? Well, first of all, what are you talking about? The only real evidence that we have that a whole bunch of people were Christian martyrs is actually from one of the Gospels that's not canonical. I think it's the Gospel of Peter, where a lot of the records of the martyrs are kept. But the Gospel of Peter is considered not a gospel. In fact, some of its stories are so outlandish that even the councils that codified the scriptures dismissed it. I find it interesting that Christians want to make this claim about all these martyrs, and yet the book that they claim, that is, those claims are based on, well, holy shit, they don't even have it in their canon. Why? Because it's questionable. So if we're going to say that that particular gospel, particularly the Gospel of Peter and a few other sources, are questionable because of certain things that are in them and certain thoughts that are put forward, why the hell do we believe them about the martyrs? The fact of the matter is we don't really have any good evidence that anybody was killed for their belief in Jesus, other than some tradition and a few of the sources I mentioned saying so. The fact of the matter is, your belief that these people testified to Jesus faithfully for 10 years, 10, 20, 30, whatever years, and suddenly and many of them died for their faith, rests on, well, church tradition, which had every interest in making sure that all of its original adherents were martyrs. Do you have any outside sources for this? Because I never could find any as a theist.
2. How do you explain the rise of Christianity to between 5 and 6 million by 313 when it was finally legalized from such humble roots?
How do you explain the rise of Christianity? I don't know. How do you explain the rise of Buddhism? How do you explain the rise of Shintoism? How do you explain the rise of Judaism or Islam or a myriad of other religions? There are tons of religions that just rise up from very humble origins. Every religion has started with some sort of founder or founding group or a group of people that started it, and slowly but surely, through one means or another, people have believed it. You seem to have a notion behind this question that somehow this is peculiar to Christianity, and the fact of the matter is it isn't. I would explain the rise of Christianity as a very dedicated sect that somehow got limelight thanks to Emperor Nero. He kind of actually did him a favor. If he had never accused them of being the ones that burned down Rome, then, quite frankly, I don't know if anybody would have known that the Christians existed. Later on, the real reason that Christianity survived, thrived, became something very big, and took hold was the fact that it became the religion of the Roman Empire. If that had not happened, I don't think that we would be talking so much about Christianity today. But the fact of the matter is, this is a very normal and very mundane origin story when you really look at it. Somebody had some unique teachings, a few people followed it. Slowly but surely, the church grew because people are gullible and they believe stuff. So there you have it. Where did Christianity come from?
3. What powered inflation of the universe?
Number 3, what powered the inflation of the universe? I don't know. And nobody knows. And for you to claim anything otherwise would be, well, God of the gaps. You're claiming something in ignorance that you can't possibly know. Just because we don't have an answer doesn't mean that your answer is the one that is correct. You have to prove that. You would have to prove that your particular version of God is what is necessary to power the inflation of the universe. And so far, apologists really haven't been able to do that. So I don't know what powered the inflation of the universe, and neither do you.
4. Why are humans spiritual?
Why are humans spiritual? Oh, shit. What do you mean by that? What do you mean by spiritual? That we're emotional? That we like rituals? That we like to believe in fantasy stories and things like that? That seems to be very innocuous to the human condition. And what you call spiritual, I would call just normal, just something that we have developed. It's our emotions, our rationality, our thoughts, things that we have developed because of survival that we somehow codify and we rename. We give new definitions to and call it spiritual. But I would say that people aren't really spiritual. That's just what they say about themselves. Spirituality to me doesn't exist. I think it's a nice pipe dream and a fantasy, but doesn't mean that I can't hang out with people that believe in spirituality. I get along pretty well with pagans. I kind of like them.
5. Where did consciousness come from?
Where did consciousness come from? Well, how can I say this except that there is no evidence of consciousness away from a physical brain. As much as people would like to say there's some sort of immortal soul or anything else, I don't know the particulars because that's not my field of study, but I'm fairly certain that there are many atheists as well as non-atheists that have put forth the evolutionary development of consciousness. I know that for myself right now, I have read several books on this subject, but I don't really think that anybody really has any other good answers other than as the brain grew, as different things developed, as we developed different evolutionary traits that allowed us to survive and thrive better using our mind and using our brains, consciousness developed, it evolved. And as a survival mechanism and as a way to do better and better and better. And as far as that goes, that's all that's really necessary. The real thing, though, that you're trying to probably insinuate is that somehow consciousness is some sort of spirituality. In order to prove that, you would have to prove that consciousness can exist outside of a human brain. So far, nobody's been able to do that. So, what is consciousness? It's biological, it's human. It's what we developed as we evolved as a species.
6. How do you explain what some have called our sixth sense?
Sixth sense. I don't know. I seem to remember reading somewhere that we have more than six now. I think scientists have come up with at least 10 or 11 senses that we have, but I suppose you're talking about intuition. If you spend a long time as a species dodging spears and lions and everything else, you're going to eventually develop some sort of intuitive sense of danger. Maybe our sixth sense is more of this development of agency, because agency is a survival trait. It is better to assume that a lion is moving the grass instead of nothing, such as the wind is moving the grass. We assume agency, and so therefore we assume that these moments that we dodge the bullet or whatever somehow are something more than just our innate abilities as we've developed them for survival through evolution. You know, you haven't really proved that this innate spiritual sense exists. Just because you claim it exists, it seems to me that you should prove it exists before you ask me this question.
7. How did the Earth overcome what MIT and Stanford physicists call statistically miraculous odds to have habitable conditions?
How do you explain why we survive despite incredible odds? I don't know. I think one thing that I realized as a former creationist is I understood probability and statistics very badly. Sure, it's long odds for a raindrop to fall on a cloud, fall a couple of miles, and land on my tongue. But if several million raindrops are forming in that cloud, soaking an area, one of them has a really good chance of hitting my tongue if I stick it out. Here's the thing. This is true of evolution. The real problem a lot of you don't seem to understand is we didn't just get one shot and overcome incredible odds. At every turn in the way, there were millions of shots, and that significantly reduces down the odds quite a bit. In fact, we'd have to say that because we're here and we are what we are, the odds are 1-to-1 that we're here, because that's what happened. The fact of the matter is this incredible odds argument or anything involved probability and statistics simply doesn't take into account that it's not just one shot. It's literally millions and millions and millions of shots. Sooner or later, you throw enough shit at the wall, it'll stick. And there we are, humanity, shit stuck to a wall.
8. Why does humanity cherish humility and honesty over pride and deceit?
Why is it that we value virtue rather than non-virtue? I'm going to break down your question into something a little bit more digestible and a little bit broader. Why do we like humility? Well, I got the 9 noble virtues there behind me. I like them. But every single one of them has one quality that I think is why human beings value them, no God required. Every single one of them leads to better survival and better prosperity. The things that you mentioned are negative, such as deception or pride, bad kind of pride, I would say. I would say that those don't lead to survival. They don't lead to good things. What they lead to is, quite frankly, a bunch of garbage, which is why that you have to realize that virtue flows out of a lot of things, but it doesn't require a God. We believe in fidelity, for instance, because loyalty from a survival and prosperity standpoint is better than disloyalty. Courage is more necessary than cowardice. The coward may live for a day, but he won't survive long term. To survive long term requires courage and discipline and being hospitable. Well, someday I might find myself on the road and in need of hospitality because, I don't have certain things. If I'm hospitable, I'm expecting reciprocity, which is kind of, your next question. So I'll deal with it then.
9. Why do almost all feel compelled to do what's right by helping neighbors? Why is there a norm of reciprocity?
Why do we put such a value on doing right? Why is there such thing as reciprocity? Because it's a good survival trait. Come on. If I am standing around a campfire with my fellow apes with our spears, and I decide to go in a circle around that fire and point my spear out with the rest of them, we're all in reciprocity of relationship with each other. We don't know where the attack might come from, but we have definitely taken care of it by trusting in one another. This doesn't require God. In fact, it doesn't even require a belief in God. It just requires a good understanding of human nature. Reciprocity is simply one of the best morals that there is, for the most part. There can be problems with it, and we actually have a problem, I think, sometimes with it being overdeveloped from a survival point of view, because people think they owe people something that they don't owe shit to. And that can be a bad thing, too. These last two questions on morality, I have to admit, they are questions on my brain, but I've read enough now in some of the books I've read to know this. No God is required for them. The fact is, morality has been developed by human beings because it's a necessary development of a social species. You have to know how to survive and, more importantly, how to prosper so you lead to long-term survival. So virtues and doing what is right and reciprocity, these are all things that we need to do that. And we've developed them out of a sense of survival and prosperity. No God required.
10. What is our greater purpose?
What is our greater purpose? What is our greater purpose? I don't think we have one. I think that's the problem. Everybody wants a greater purpose, but they never prove that a greater purpose is necessary or even exists. It seems to me that question falls in the same category for me as God. Prove to me that there is a necessity of a greater purpose for humanity. I don't think there is. I think that each person can define their own purpose. And if they're smart, they'll define that purpose within the confines of our social species, which says, hey, let's go forward and do what we need to do. My real problem with this question is it assumes and begs the question that a greater purpose is even necessary. To me, if there is any purpose for humanity, it's we've evolved to survive. And so it's not so much that we have chosen a greater purpose, it just kind of exists with who we are. I don't see the need for a greater purpose. I need a purpose for myself. I can come up with that by myself too. So I guess I'm not really seeing the necessity of this question, or once again, for the 10th time, what any of these have to do with atheism.
And 11. Why is there evil in the world? Thank you very much. This is ChristianApologist.com. Goodbye.
Finally, why is there evil in the world? What do you mean by evil? Here's my problem. I don't have a problem with human beings defining what good is and evil is. Right here, good and evil. But the moment you start talking about evil as if it's a noun, if it's personified, no, I don't believe in that. People are capable of evil actions, evil thoughts. They're capable of good actions and good thoughts. But the good or evil is an adjective, not an entity in and of itself. The reason there are evil in the world is people do evil things, some of them pretty heinous. But none of that really works towards their survival in the long run, does it? Usually such people get cut off pretty early. Now, there's always exceptions, but this idea that there needs to be some sort of great evil, what do you mean? I'd also say this. Isn't that a question for you theists? Isn't the problem of evil your problem, not mine? I can at least explain evil in the world through naturalistic and humanistic causes. You, on the other hand, have a God who is all-loving and all-powerful and knows everything. So how does an all-loving God, all-benevolent God, tolerate the evil in the world without doing something about it when he has all power to do something about it? And don't tell me all about the gospel, because to me, the gospel of Jesus Christ is inadequate to deal with the evil in the world and, quite frankly, totally unnecessary. If God is omnipotent and all-loving and wants every person to come into the kingdom of God, as it says in 1 Timothy 2:4, then everybody should be in the kingdom of God, everybody should be convinced, and nobody should be suffering. Nobody should be causing harm. I simply look at this is the way the world is. I don't necessarily label everything as evil. At the same time, I don't see that God has really done anything about it either. So why is this my problem? It seems to me that that's a question for you. Given a good God and a loving God, why is there evil in the world? That's theodicy, and it still sits there and it stares right in your face as a theist. One little epilogue point. Not one of these damn 11 questions had anything to do with atheism and the claim of atheism. It seems to me that these apologists have once again lumped a whole bunch of crap and called it atheism. And really, there's only one thing in it that's atheism. Cosmology has nothing to do with atheism. Who gives a shit about the history of Christianity and the Christian martyrs? That has nothing to do with atheism. That has everything to do with you providing evidence for your claim, which I pointed out why I don't find those convincing. Whether atheism has nothing to do with what power the universe or evolution or any of that, or whether we think of sixth sense or morality or anything like that, that has nothing to do with the statement of atheism saying, I'm sorry, your God claim doesn't have the evidence I need to make it convincing to me. That's my statement as an atheist. None of these questions should really directly address the subject of atheism. If you're trying to provide an alternate explanation of why atheism isn't true, none of these really address it. Whether or not I have a greater purpose or there's evil in the world doesn't really address atheism. If anything, those things seem to speak to the fact that maybe there isn't a God because there isn't any greater purpose, and the problem of evil is really a problem for the theist, not for me. All in all, I'm glad I didn't make a drinking game out of this, of take a shot every time that the question doesn't have a damn thing to do with atheism. I would have had to have 11 shots of whatever, and I would probably be very tipsy right now, even a big-ass guy like me. And I'm not trying to be rude to apologists, but this whole thing shows me how terrible the state of apologetics is in the Christian church. Number one, if God was truly who you say he was, apologetics should be unnecessary. The evidence for God should be all around us, and it should be self-evident. Hell, if God really loves me and cares about me and wants me to go to heaven, he should have come down himself and introduced himself personally to each one. He's certainly capable of doing so, so why hasn't he done it? If his desire is that all men be saved and come to a knowledge of the truth, then why hasn't he done a damn thing about it? Now, that aside, look at this. You're trying to ask questions of atheists, and none of these questions really have anything to do with atheism. And it's not me you should be asking questions of. You should be saying, okay, what kind of thing can I present that present a convincing case for the existence of God? That is what you should be doing, not asking questions of me. There's tons of people that don't believe in your God, even if they believe in another God. You know, the Odinist believes in Odin, doesn't believe in the Christian God. He is, from your perspective, a non-believer. The Buddhist, the Shintoist, the Islamic, the Judaist. If you're a Christian apologetics group, I'm a little disappointed because this is the sad state of apologetics and why it did so little to convince me to stay inside the faith. Because you're asking the wrong questions, you're not listening to what atheists are saying about themselves, and you're not realizing that, oh shit, atheism really isn't making the claim, we are. If God exists, you should be able to prove the claim. But so far, it's kind of like proof that there's leprechauns or pink unicorns with rainbows coming out their ass. In short, there is no evidence. And at least any evidence you've offered so far can be countered, dismissed, or just plain isn't convincing. You got a lot of work to do, apologists, but I think you're barking up the wrong tree by attacking atheists and attacking cosmology and attacking abiogenesis and attacking evolution. Even if you prove all of that false, this doesn't help you. And that's the real problem with this whole thing, and why I did this video for one simple purpose, to show how bad apologetics is. And these 11 questions are just lousy apologetics because you're not even addressing the issue. You're just trying to get in there with some sort of gotcha question. But that's not the task ahead of apologetics. Give me a convincing argument or evidence for the existence of God. Convince me. Until then, I'm sitting here waiting for you to convince me. Good luck. To save you a little time, all the classic arguments for the existence of God, I've already looked at and dismissed. So try to find something new. I want to thank everybody for stopping by. I appreciate all of you coming by and taking the time to look at this video. Hopefully it gives you some insight into some of my thoughts about some of these questions that this person asked. I appreciate every like, share, subscribe. Continue to do so. It really helps grow the channel. You can also follow me on Facebook. It's a great way to get any messages and things like that. You'll also get informed when the new video drops there as well. Also, a big shout out to my Patreons. Thank you for following me. You can support this channel on Patreon or through PayPal, and I appreciate any support that you can get. And hopefully I can convince you to be a rabid atheist like myself. In the meantime, this is Ed Raby, also known as the Rabid Atheist, signing off and wishing you a good day.